Investigative journalist Sarah Carter from Circa News will join us in just a minute. Now, she, along with her colleague, John Solomon, they have confirmed the existence of, in fact, a FISA court warrant order granted in October of 2016, just weeks before the general election, to monitor Trump Tower in there, a computer server that was right inside there. Now, the report finds that justification for the warrant was to examine the server that appeared to be communicating with a Russian bank. Officials told Circa News that they quickly determined that nothing, quote, was nefarious happening or going on there. Now, I can tell you from my own experience, now think about this, from my communications during the campaign with the Trump campaign, most of the staffers, 99% of them, were all connected to the Trump organization. In other words, their emails. This is beyond troubling. We need answers tonight. Were Trump campaign emails ever connected to the server? If so, were they collected as raw intelligence during this surveillance operation? Now, the reason we ask this is because of what we saw happen to former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. Remember news reports? A December call that he made to a Russian ambassador was captured by what the New York Times described as a, quote, routine wiretap of the Russian diplomat's phone. Well, U.S. intelligence agencies, they do routinely monitor foreign officials. That's their job. But protections, known as minimization procedures, have been put in place to ensure that American citizens are not caught up in that surveillance. In other words, they then would have no constitutional rights, and that their identities and their rights are protected. Now, this, of course, was not the case with Lieutenant General Flynn, because a transcript of the call was created, given to intelligence officials, who then leaked the details to the press, which, by the way, is a felony according to the Espionage Act. We also know from a New York Times report that in his final weeks in office, that President Obama revised the Executive Order 12333, which greenlights widespread sharing of raw data collected by American intelligence agencies across 17 government agencies. That's an additional 16 agencies. All their employees can now gain access to top secret intel that they never had access to before. Now, we've been asking, why did President Obama wait until the last minute, 2 weeks before he leaves, to issue that order? It's an order that he did not apply to himself for 8 years. And since this order was signed, well, we've seen an explosion of leaks coming from intelligence agencies. Look at your screen right there. Now, take a good look at it. So given what's happened, it's time for President Obama and officials who oversaw this operation and the surveillance of the server at Trump Tower, they need to come clean. What did they know? What information was gathered? They need to assure you, the American people, that this was not spying on a political opposition party just weeks before an election. All of this raises very serious national security, ethical issues at a very high level, privacy issues we've never had before, because crimes were likely committed here. Certainly in the case of retired Lieutenant General Flynn, somebody committed a felony. So all we're doing on the show is we're raising questions. We're looking for answers. In fact, we have reached out to President Obama's spokesperson to see if they would respond to the questions we've been asking. Shocking. So far, we've not heard back. Also tonight, WikiLeaks has released thousands of documents and is making very serious allegations about CIA spying capabilities and techniques. Now, according to WikiLeaks, U.S. spies are able to access some televisions, smartphones, iPhones, and record sound, images, and even private messages on encrypted communication apps. Now, WikiLeaks is also alleging that the CIA has the ability to make it appear that its cyber activity was conducted by foreign governments, say like Russia, or hackers. Now, the group explained further in a press release. They said, quote, the CIA's Remote Devices Branch Umbrage Group collects and maintains a substantial library of attack techniques stolen from malware produced in other states, including the Russian Federation. And with Umbrage and related projects, the CIA can not only increase its total number of attack types, but also misdirect the attribution by leaving behind these, quote, fingerprints of the groups that the attack techniques were stolen from. In other words, they can make it seem like it's the Russians and it's them. Now, the power and capabilities of American intelligence agencies are profound, and they are extensive. And if all of this is true, what that means is a possibility that an operative working on behalf of the former president and other left-wing activists are trying to sabotage, delegitimize President Donald Trump. After all, why did the leaks happen as soon as Obama left? Until we get answers, we're going to keep asking these questions. Here now is Circa News national security correspondent Sarah Carter. Sarah, do I have all that right? Is that a good summary?
Yes, it was a great summary. There was one little change that just happened right before I came on your show, Sean. And what was really interesting, John and I spoke to some very senior U.S. officials. They clarified this. They said there was a FISA warrant in October that was looking at the overall Russian hacking investigation, but that the FBI, when they monitored the server, Trump Tower, it was actually located away from Trump Tower. It wasn't under the FISA. They did normal strategic type of FBI investigations that didn't require the FISA. So they went into the server, but they did not use the FISA to do that. They did have a FISA, however, in October at the exact same time as this investigation.
So there are two instances now of spying.
Two. Yes,
wow.
2 instances. So this is completely new evidence. And remember, we all thought, and everybody had reported, that the server was inside Trump Tower. The server was not located in Trump Tower, according to our sources.
With the second issue warrant, whatever the FBI was doing, was that in Trump Tower?
That's what we don't know now. Because now that opens up a whole slew of questions, the questions you just brought up in your monologue, right? So those questions need to be answered. But what we do know is this. The people that were investigating Trump's server, they said that the FBI did not look into emails, they did not listen to his phone calls, and that they found no evidence at all of any type of crime associated with Trump business.
This is important what you're saying. The news media in this country has repeated this narrative that the Trump campaign were colluding with the Russians to undermine the electoral process. You're saying that you're reporting and look, John Solomon's worked for AP for what, 20 years, and you both worked together at the Washington Times, credible news organizations. So what you're saying is they found no evidence at all whatsoever of any collusion between the campaign and the Russians. True?
Absolutely true. They found no evidence of that. In fact, when we spoke to our sources who had direct access to this investigation, what was happening with the FBI, they didn't even find evidence of collusion with Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, which is interesting because even when those leaks came out and they were referring to the Logan Act and everybody saw this as part of a broad... Yeah, they thought this was part of the original investigation into Russian hacking and now President Trump. It wasn't. It was completely different. It was a completely separate incident, and the leak came out anyways. It was monitoring of Russian assets.
And that would be a felony as defined by the Espionage Act, as I understand it?
That is absolutely correct. And as you know, the Inspector General at the DOJ is now investigating both the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Very important. I want to stay on this story because we only have limited time. There's too much information in your piece and your new discovery. So you have confirmed that the FBI found no evidence of any collusion whatsoever. Nothing. Number two, you have confirmed that they did get a FISA warrant in October in the weeks leading up to the election. Correct?
That is correct.
And they also got somehow another warrant that allowed them to look into the Trump campaign. We don't know what the nature of that was.
We think it had to do with the banks in Russia, that they were looking at connections between then President Trump and the banks in Russia, both which are Alpha Bank and SVB Bank. But we're not 100% certain on that. What we don't know is who was connected to that FISA. What was that FISA looking at? And that is very highly classified. Nobody wants to talk about that particular FISA right now. They said it did have to do with the Russian hacking on a very broad level, but it didn't hone in directly on Trump, is what I was told.
And the bottom line, too, is so far they found no collusion whatsoever, which I think is really important. And, you know, we don't know the degree to which, if they went to a server that might have been off-site, but it still took in the information from Trump Tower, then Donald Trump it's seemingly technically right. The New York Times used the term wiretapping. Now they're backtracking. But everybody in the media has called Donald Trump a liar when he sent out a tweet about President Obama being involved. Well, certainly it's his administration. And maybe, I don't know exactly how you call a wiretap. Does it have to be a phone call? If the government's looking into one server, can't you say they were tapping into it? Because that's how I would define it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are semantics, right? This is how people are using words. There is a distinction between a FISA and then a wiretapping, but they did tap. I mean, they were looking
They were
into
investigating the president in the weeks leading up to the election, and you're saying there were 2 warrants, one FISA, one non-FISA.
Correct.
Okay, so now did they find anything at all? Anything at all?
According to the sources that we spoke with, they did not find any evidence that would lead to any kind of criminal prosecution of anyone on the Trump team. And that is what we were told.
So basically, you're told by people that he's totally exonerated. This whole Russian narrative the media's been running with has been a lie. It's been untrue. And that they've known it for some time and they never told us.
Well, to some extent, yes.
That's pretty scary. Now, one other thing, because I think this is very important. As it relates to who knew what, when, and where, the president made a very clever statement. He said, well, I didn't order, nor did anyone in the White House order the FISA investigation. But that's not an acknowledgement. Did he know? Did Ben Rhodes know? Did Loretta Lynch sign off on it? Did Valerie Jarrett know about this? Did Dan Pfeiffer? In the middle of a campaign, you have a sitting president with the power of the intelligence community looking into an opposition candidate in the weeks leading up to an election? Does that seem like something that is appropriate? Were there lies told to gather that FISA approval? Do we know if there was an attempt to get one in June, for example?
Well, what we know is that, according to our sources, there was really no attempt to get one in June. Now, that's what they said. We don't know that for fact yet. But what we do know is that in October, it was very interesting. Harry Reid came out and said, you know, there's going to be some explosive
Hillary Clinton tweeted
evidence.
It out a week before the election.
Hillary Clinton tweeted that out. So people were getting a whiff of this, and we believe that people were briefed on this. So this is when everything started. And this is what these intelligence officials are telling us. Look, this has become highly politicized from October all the way through January with the removal of General Flynn from the NSA. You know, this has become so politicized that they're watching this in horror, and they wanted to set the record straight.
I have one last question. We did learn from WikiLeaks that the CIA uses stolen malware to give attribution, if you will, to cyber attacks to other nations. In other words, they leave the fingerprints. They could do the job and leave the fingerprints and say, oh, it looks like the Russians did it. Is that possible that happened here?
I mean, that's something that we have to investigate. I have no evidence of that, but they are capable. They are capable, and so are other intelligence agencies.
Thank you for your great work. We're going to continue to follow this, get these questions answered. You know, so are there deep state Obama holdover operatives working behind the scenes to try and undermine the Trump administration? Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, weighs in, and later tonight.